There are moments in life when failure doesn't arrive with a dramatic ending. It comes quietly, no headlines, no applause, just a single decision that tells someone their dream will continue without them. In 2019, a young singer walked off the stage of a televised singing competition in the Philippines carrying exactly that feeling. The lights were still bright. The audience was still cheering. The cameras had already turned toward the contestants who remained. But for him, something had changed forever. It wasn't simply that he had been eliminated. It was the question that followed him afterward. Maybe they were right. Maybe he wasn't the kind of performer people remembered. Maybe talent alone wasn't enough. Years later, millions of viewers would watch the same man receive not one, but 2 golden buzzers on one of Britain's biggest television shows. Overnight, people would call him an overnight success. Yet nothing about his story happened overnight, because this isn't really a story about a television competition. It's a story about what happens after the cameras stop rolling. Before audiences across Britain learned his name, Matty Juniosa was simply another hopeful musician growing up in the Philippines. Like countless young singers, music wasn't just entertainment, it was possibility. Every performance represented another chance to prove that a different future might exist. The Philippines has produced extraordinary vocal talent for decades. Singing competitions are more than television there. They have become gateways to opportunity. Thousands audition every year, knowing that only a handful will ever make it beyond the first rounds. In 2019, Matty did exactly that. He entered Idol Philippines, joining thousands of aspiring singers chasing the same dream. Week after week, he survived another elimination. Each performance pushed him closer to the finals. Eventually, he reached the top 12, a remarkable achievement considering how many contestants had already gone home. For many viewers, reaching that stage looked like success. For competitors, however, success often changes its definition. Once you've stood that close to the finish line, anything less than the final victory can feel like starting over. And eventually, that's exactly what happened. His journey on the show came to an end before the finals. There was no controversy, no dramatic confrontation, no scandal to explain the result. The judges simply chose other contestants to continue. Just like that, months of preparation ended in a few quiet moments. Television competitions have an unusual rhythm. One week someone becomes a national favorite. The next week another contestant captures the spotlight, and yesterday's story begins disappearing from public memory. Many talented singers experience that reality. The applause fades. Social media moves on. Life resumes. For some contestants, that moment becomes the end of a dream. For Matty, it became something else entirely. If you've ever worked toward something for years only to watch it disappear in a single day, you already understand how moments like these can change a person. Sometimes they convince us to quit. Sometimes they quietly prepare us for opportunities we cannot yet imagine. Stay with us, because what happened next wasn't the comeback anyone expected. Not long after Idol Philippines, another opportunity appeared. Several former contestants came together to form a vocal group called ID Dolls. Instead of continuing as solo performers, they would combine their strengths and build something together. On paper, it sounded promising. Each member already had television exposure. They had growing fan bases, live performance experience, and enough momentum to begin building careers beyond the competition. For a while, the plan seemed to work. The trio performed at local events, accepted regular bookings, and slowly developed a loyal audience. They weren't filling massive arenas, but they were working consistently. For young musicians, that alone represented progress. Yet careers rarely unfold as smoothly as they appear from the outside. Audiences usually see finished performances. They rarely see rehearsals filled with uncertainty. They don't hear private conversations after disappointing shows. They never witness the quiet doubts performers carry back home. Behind the performances, Matty reportedly found himself facing a different challenge altogether. It wasn't about his voice. It wasn't about his work ethic. Instead, he began hearing comments about something far more personal: his appearance. Questions surfaced about whether audiences would connect with him in the same way they connected with others. Remarks about his image slowly became part of the environment surrounding his career. Criticism of appearance can be especially painful because it targets something deeply personal rather than something easily improved through practice. A singer can spend years strengthening technique. A performer can rehearse choreography for thousands of hours. But confidence is much harder to rebuild once it has been repeatedly questioned. Many artists never speak publicly about moments like these. Some carry them quietly for years. Others allow those voices to become louder than their own. Imagine standing on stage, giving everything you have, while privately wondering whether people are judging your appearance before they even hear the first note. That kind of pressure isn't visible from the audience, yet it can shape every performance. Still, the group continued working. For roughly 3 years, dolls performed together, pursuing opportunities wherever they could find them. Like many emerging artists, they experienced encouraging moments alongside disappointments. The future remained uncertain. Then, gradually, the journey came to an end. There was no explosive breakup, no dramatic announcement. The performances simply stopped. The members began following separate paths. Sometimes endings arrive quietly. A calendar fills with fewer bookings. Messages become less frequent. Plans slowly disappear. One chapter closes without anyone realizing they've already turned the final page. For Matty, that ending created another difficult question. Should he keep chasing music? Or should he accept that perhaps the dream had already reached its limit? Many people would have chosen stability. They might have looked for a different career, stayed close to family, and treated music as something they once loved. Instead, Matty made a decision that would completely reshape his future. He left the Philippines. He traveled thousands of miles to a country where almost nobody knew his name. There were no waiting fans, no television recognition, no guarantee that music would ever pay his bills again. Only a suitcase, a dream that had already survived several disappointments, and the willingness to begin again from absolute zero. It would become the loneliest chapter of his journey. Ironically, it would also become the chapter that changed everything. Moving to another country is difficult under the best of circumstances. Moving there after your career has stalled is something else entirely. When Matty Juniosa arrived in Glasgow, Scotland, he wasn't arriving as a celebrated performer. He wasn't stepping into a recording contract or preparing for a major concert tour. He arrived as another international student carrying little more than determination and the hope that the next chapter of his life would be different from the last. For the first time in years, almost nobody knew who he was. Back home, people could at least recognize him from Idol Philippines or from his time with dolls. In Scotland, those accomplishments meant very little. He wasn't introduced as a television finalist or a recording artist. He was simply another young man trying to build a future. There is a strange kind of freedom that comes with anonymity. But there is also loneliness. Every familiar face disappears. Every routine changes. Even ordinary tasks, finding a place to live, learning a new city, understanding unfamiliar customs, become daily challenges. For many international students, adapting to a new country is already overwhelming. Doing it while trying to rebuild a dream can feel almost impossible. Matty enrolled in musical theater studies, choosing not to abandon music but to strengthen it from an entirely different angle. Instead of focusing only on singing competitions, he immersed himself in acting, vocal technique, stage movement, and character performance. Musical theater demanded something broader than simply hitting difficult notes. It required discipline, storytelling, emotional control, and consistency night after night. It was a different education, one that no television competition could provide. But education alone doesn't pay rent. Like thousands of students around the world, Matty found himself balancing his ambitions with practical reality. He worked as a waiter, serving customers while continuing to train whenever he had the chance. It's easy to romanticize stories like this after success arrives. People often say things like, "He never gave up." What they rarely acknowledge is how exhausting persistence actually is. Imagine spending your evenings carrying trays through a busy restaurant while wondering if you'll ever stand on another stage. Imagine practicing songs after long work shifts, knowing there may never be another audience waiting to hear them. Those aren't glamorous moments. They're quiet moments, private moments, and yet they are often the moments that define a person's future far more than the applause ever does. Customers probably noticed that their waiter had an unusually powerful singing voice. Some may even have complimented him. Few could have imagined they were speaking to someone who had already competed on national television in another part of the world. Life settled into a rhythm. Classes, work, practice, sleep. Then the cycle began again. Days became weeks. Weeks became months. Months quietly turned into years. There was no viral moment. No dramatic breakthrough. No sudden phone call changing everything overnight. Only steady preparation. If you've ever wondered whether your own hard work is going unnoticed, this part of Matty's journey might feel familiar. Sometimes the most important seasons of life are the ones that seem invisible to everyone else. As time passed, another opportunity slowly entered his life. An audition announcement. This one wasn't in the Philippines. It wasn't even on the same continent. It was for one of the United Kingdom's biggest television programs, Britain's Got Talent. At first glance, the idea almost seemed unrealistic. After everything that had happened before, another talent competition could easily have felt like reopening an old wound. He had already experienced the excitement. He had already experienced elimination. He already knew how quickly television could move on to someone else. Why put himself through that again? Perhaps the easier decision would have been not to audition at all. Nobody could reject you if you never stepped onto the stage. Nobody could tell you that you weren't enough. Nobody could reopen old insecurities. Fear has a remarkable ability to disguise itself as common sense. It whispers that protecting yourself from disappointment is the safest choice. But safety rarely creates extraordinary stories. Eventually, Matty made his decision. He would audition, not because success was guaranteed, but because regret would have been harder to live with than rejection. When he walked into the audition venue in early 2026, he carried years of invisible history with him. The audience couldn't see the disappointment of 2019. They couldn't see the criticism about his appearance. They couldn't see the restaurant shifts. They couldn't see the lonely evenings spent practicing after classes. All they saw was a quiet singer standing confidently under bright lights. Sometimes the audience only witnesses the final chapter of a story that has already taken years to write.